I think at the core of every idea, like even some silly Old Spice idea, like even like some nonsensical idea, there's always like I think the best ones usually there's a kernel of human truth. And it's like if there's a kernel of truth in your idea, it's also a lot easier to sell because you can point to that kernel of truth and be like, this is why this is good.
Hello, and welcome to the Bagley Talks to an Important Person show, where the world's top advertising professionals break down their creative process and reveal the secrets and techniques to doing the best work of your life. I'm your host, Jason Bagley, Olivia Rodrigo fan, former ECD of Wieden & Kennedy Portland, and founder of the Audacious School of Astonishing Pursuits, where I teach creatives in 8 weeks what it took me 16 years at Wieden & Kennedy to learn. If you're watching this on YouTube, hi, this is what my face looks like. Let me know what you think in the comments. But if you're listening to the podcast and want to see an anatomical model wearing a Boba Fett helmet or the super detailed presentation decks we share, there's a link to the YouTube channel in the podcast description. I highly recommend it. But without further ado, let's get to today's guest.
It's Jason Bagley's advertising podcast. He interviews important people, it's true. But that doesn't mean that you're not important, 'cause he didn't choose to interview you. Maybe he was just planning to contact you to interview you on another day. Or maybe he doesn't have your email address. Every creature on the planet is important in their own special way. Cows, sharks, and gazelles deserve to be interviewed. Birds and whales each have a valid point of view. I mean, they're probably not as interesting to talk to as you, but you're less interesting than the person on that show. It's true, I'm not sure what my point is.
You're going to want to check this out, because if you aren't familiar with Sheena Brady and her work, then get ready for inspiration and delight to jump down your throat and tap dance on your appendix, because she is one of advertising's most talented writers and creative directors who is behind more famous work than, I don't know, there's not a good metaphor. She's behind a lot of famous work. Like Coke video game, Coke It's Mine, one of my favorite Nike spots. She made a short film with Kobe Bryant, and this Nike spot, and this Nike spot, and that Nike spot. She's also a director who's from Alaska and is close personal friends with a polar bear named Steve. If that's not enough for you, then I don't know what else to say. It's Sheena Brady, everybody. Sheena Brady, welcome to Bagley Talks to an Important Person. What do you have to say about this? What do you have to say about appearing on Bagley Talks to an Important Person?
I'm flattered. I don't really feel like I'm that important, so that's good. It's just
Let's be honest. Let's be
don't
honest.
disappoint your audience.
You were important long before I was ever important. If I am important to this day, I don't know if I've achieved that, but we worked at Wieden together many years ago, and you were very fancy and very talented, and everybody knew it, and you got promoted to be a CD. I feel like very quickly in my mind, and because you came in and just did so much good work right away. So I've been a big fan for a long time, and there's no hope that the rest of us can be as talented as you, but we're going to see if you can try to teach us how to do it.
Well, thank you for that introduction. No pressure. I hate to warn you. One of my first jobs in high school, they told me I was a horrible interviewer. So, well, they said I worked really hard, though.
That's a good way to set the expectations low. So real quick, we don't want to spend too much time on this part of it because it's what every podcast talks about, but give us a brief history. You were born and raised in Alaska?
Yes, I was born and raised in Alaska, near the Arctic Circle. So I was born
the fast food restaurant, the Arctic Circle.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there is that. That didn't make it to the Arctic Circle. But yeah, it was really dark when I was born. We got like less than 4 hours of daylight. And I feel like that maybe sums up my personality a little bit. Nature versus nurture. But yeah, I was born in Alaska, and then I went to University of Oregon in Eugene. And then I was dating some guy, and his homework was to come up with a print ad for Haagen-Dazs ice cream, and I was writing like 10-page term papers and, doing all the, really boring homework. And I said, oh, I'm going to sign up for that class. That seems really easy. So that is how I kind of got into advertising.
So had you done much writing growing up? Like, did you keep a journal? Did you do anything?
No, I actually came from a family of like engineers and really smart people. And I wasn't really smart in that way. And I guess I kind of was always creative, but I didn't realize it because I was so literal at that point that I thought creativity was like, oh, you can paint or write poetry. It was like more visual arts based. And I didn't think about creativity. I only kind of found out I was creative through advertising.
So
But I was creative back in the day, I realized it when I look back on it after the fact that we would make little movies and and whatnot. But it was just
okay. So there were signs. You didn't recognize them, but there were signs.
I didn't recognize it
when you were younger. You liked to do creative stuff.
Yeah, I remember I won in an English class. I won the English teacher kind of hated me because I was a little bit of a troublemaker, and so much to her, I guess, displeasure, her kids picked my kid story as like the best kid story, So it was like, oh, that was just, a dumb. Maybe my level of creativity is for like elementary school children, so maybe that's why that's why I'm good at advertising. But yeah, I wouldn't say I'm not going to write the next great American novel, but.
That's funny because you sound kind of like me in that I was always creative, but I never thought of myself as creative, and I never thought that would become anything, or that was even, I was raised in a blue collar home. Just that wasn't on my radar that you could do something creative to make money for a living. I just thought like, you got to somehow become a doctor or a lawyer or something else. But then I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, I loved doing creative things from the time I was a kid. I just genuinely loved doing it. There was never any like, oh, maybe I'll do this when I get older.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, very similar. I grew up at a sheet metal business, like literally at my parents' business, and it was like, when I went to college, I was like, I guess I will go to business school. That sounds responsible, but I didn't know how to do math. So I just kind of, by default, just kind of ended up in this more, place. So yeah,
cool.
Here we are. It worked out. I guess the universe had its plan for me.
Had an agenda. The universe had an agenda.
Yeah.
And do you think, like, when I think of your work, one of the things I always love about it, and I've been able to see a lot of your stuff that didn't get produced or before it got produced. And to me, you have a very strong point of view. Like your work always has like a point of view that it's saying something. It's provocative in some way, or it's like taking a position. It's not just sort of generic, like, here's just something kind of pretty and pleasant. And I think that most great work has that. It has some sort of a point of view. Do you feel like you are just an opinionated person who just that kind of comes somewhat natural to? Are you sort of a skeptic, or like how do you, or is that something that you had to work on to, obviously you had to work on it to some degree, but why, how is that? How did Sheena Brady's work get that way?
Well, I am an opinionated person. But then also it's like, I don't know if I'm creative enough to not kind of have something to kind of push up against or think about, or, like I need to, and I am a cynic. It's like everything you said, it's kind of all of the above. I'm just always trying to kind of, have something to say, like I just don't know if I don't know if it's intentional. Like it's just kind of how I think about it. I think kind of interesting people have things to say. I'm not saying that I'm interesting. I try to be interesting, but it's just, I don't know. I'm not like a person. I'm not a wallflower, I guess. Like,
Yeah.
and I think, I guess that's kind of comes through my work without me
Yeah.
trying to do it. But, sometimes that's a brief. Like, it's not just, sometimes I don't make this stuff up, but, um, yeah, I don't, it's harder for me to do generic work because you're always trying to kind of guess what's in someone else's mind in a weird way. And it's like, I just have to kind of I have to put, it's like empathy, I guess. I have to put myself in the shoes of
Hmm.
the brand or what. So, I think a lot of times, like, if you look at all my work as a whole, yeah, maybe you get like there, you can still see who I am, even though there's
Yeah.
like ads for like Coke and Nike or Carhartt or Converse or whatever it is, because I guess, there is, you get a little of my cynicism, but I am a little bit of a cynical person, but I think I am actually very optimistic. So you kind of see that side of me too.
Yeah.
Like, I'm very tell it like it is. So then sometimes you'll see that kind of bluntness and directness in my work as well. But so yeah, I think it's like I can't separate myself from the work entirely.
Yeah. I don't think you
Um,
should.
We'll get back to Sheena and Jason in just a moment, but if you want to listen to the full version of this podcast and all other full episodes of Bagley Talks to an Important Person, check out Creative Mega Machine, Jason's exclusive 8-week creative coaching and mentorship program where Jason throws 6 metric tons of highly illegal, non-EPA approved rocket fuel on your career. Creative Mega Machine is a time machine for your career, teaching you exactly how to get the best work of your life about a decade earlier than you would otherwise. Through on-demand lessons and live Q&As with Jason, you will personally answer all your questions as he reveals all the secrets and techniques that he and his teams use to create iconic campaigns for Nike, Old Spice, KFC, Meow Wolf, and more. You will learn in 8 weeks what took him 16 years at Wieden and Kennedy to learn. There is absolutely nothing out there that will accelerate your creativity and earning potential faster than this 5-star rated program. Classes are capped at 20 students, so grab your spot before they're gone. Check out the show notes below to learn more about Creative Mega Machine. Let's get back to the podcast.
so this, I mean, you kind of, I stole this a little bit from Andy, and you gave me a couple of podcasts to listen to, and I thought he did a great job of just like, okay, start with your process a little bit. And I'm kind of weird. I mean, I think I can do this because, I was freelance and COVID, working from home and whatnot. When I was writing, I was working from home before it became cool. Um, so what I do is like I wake up super, super early, like 6 a.m., like before anyone's awake. I'm like literally just make tea and then I go straight to work. I don't shower. I don't do anything. Like I just go. I don't even surf the web. I don't do anything that's going to like wake up my brain too much. And I just start writing down ideas. And I think this is like when I say simulate a shower mindset. I think what a shower mindset is, like why everyone comes up with ideas in the shower is because it's like you're not thinking about it too hard. You're kind of half asleep. You're kind of half awake. And I have to do that. Like my problem is I can overthink stuff. So the less I think, the better. And so I have to trick myself. And I trick myself by waking up really early. And when when I was younger, it was the flip side. So, I'd go to work and then I would do this at night, kind of almost before I went to bed. My hours were just flipped. And then it's like when I'm kind of out of ideas, that's when I start looking to I look at the web, I look at, photos are a big thing for me. I love looking at a photo and just kind of imagining a story around a photo. But it's like, I find like if it's got to be stuff that kind of your mind can still wander a bit. Like it's like a half focused place. So
Yeah.
that is like my sweet spot. And then, then I eventually do shower and I do eat and I do normal things. And then when like I go back to, I work out or do whatever, if I'm feeling ambitious. And then I just kind of start over. It's like almost like that morning didn't exist. And then when I go back at it, I almost like start with like a fresh slate. Like I don't really go back to my old ideas. Like it's almost like after, depending on how much time you have on a project, it like might be a couple days later, I'll just go to all these dumb little idealits or fragments of ideas and go, okay, that one's now after like looking at it with fresh eyes, it's kind of interesting, or that one doesn't, you know, didn't stand the test of time. So
Yeah.
that's when I kind of then like dive in and get a little more detailed and then kind of figure stuff out. But I'm really kind of just trying to get a lot of stuff out in the beginning and not
It's a,
getting too precious.
it's interesting because I think a lot of times our subconscious mind is much more interesting than we are, and I think that's kind of what you're tapping into with like. That's why we sometimes have good ideas in the shower, or when we just wake up, or right before we go to bed, we're really tired. And you know, my old partner Craig Allen used to say that all of his best ideas came sitting on the toilet, and I think there's a lot of truth to that, because I think
Yeah.
getting out of our conscious mind is very logical and it's very practical, and it's really helpful to find ways to sort of get out of that and get into like play happens more. It's much more improvisational. It's tapping into the subconscious mind. When we're playing, we're just sort of flowing. And when we get into a state of creative flow, the reason that we're in that state of flow is because our conscious mind is less in control, and our subconscious mind is able to kind of break through. And it sounds like that's what you're doing with these early morning work sessions.
Yeah, I'm trying to like trick my brain a little bit, you know, and like who knows that, you know, you find what works for you, but you know, like Craig's probably on a toilet somewhere. But you know, you know, that's what I've found that's worked for me. And um, you know, that's also the reason why I can't go in an office and come up with ideas. Like even when I worked at Wyden, I would sneak off and sneak to a friend's house, my partner's house, or go home. I wasn't good at, you know, like I just needed my own little space. I can't have too much stimulation. I just, you know, find a little hole and think. Or sometimes I literally just take a shower. That works too. You know, it's
Cool.
bad on the environment. Okay, so and then I kind of we alluded to this, but I think a big when I was trying to figure out what it is I do, it kind of goes back to like I remember I was working on a ASICS campaign when I was like 21, like one of my first jobs at a agency in San Diego, and someone told me like, oh, you know, because I had to write headlines for the first time, you know, for you know a brand, and I felt the pressure of like I have to come up with headlines for ASICS, and it's my big break, and it's like don't just have a conversation. Someone told me, and that like really unlocked stuff for me. It took the pressure off, like this big thing I had to solve, and it's like no, I can just actually have a conversation. So that's like this kind of big. This is kind of I think in a nutshell of like I think why maybe my work is good. That's I guess debatable, but I think of brands as people, um, and I mean this thing very kind of literally. Um, so like, are they an earnest optimist? Are they a man of experience who's seen it all? Are they, are they, if they're an athlete, are they the guy that talks smack on the basketball court, or do they kind of keep their head down and do the work? Are they tough love, tell it like it is? Like what, you can describe your friends, you can describe your family members, like do the same thing, kind of thinking about a brand. Like, so for example, like Coke is your super positive, like earnest, glass half full friend who sees the good in everyone and everything. Like they're just almost like annoyingly sweet. Um, and like Gap, I'm trying to pick like random brands here. When we worked on Gap, it was like, they're not like they make, they're just like your laid back friend who doesn't really try too hard to be cool. They're not like the fashionista of the group. They're not chasing the fashion trends. They don't, they don't care if you do, but they're just really about like letting their kind of actions make their fashion statements. So that's kind of, that if that's a person, then you can start understanding how they would act. Carhartt, I worked on that brand. Like that's a very obvious one, but it's like they're your hardworking Midwestern uncle. They're not flashy. They're not looking for praise. They're just trying to get the job done. They're straightforward and to the point. They have work, they don't waste time with pleasantries. They kind of have work to do. So it's like that, like those are the pictures I had in my mind when I kind of started coming up with ideas. And it's like I don't have to make that stuff up. Like I didn't make up the fact that Coke was this like super optimistic glass half full brand. They had like, I'd like to buy the world a Coke. They had Mean Joe Green. They had all this DNA. They were a treat. Like literally the product was like a sweet treat. So, this stuff, unless it's like a new brand, like you don't really have to kind of make this stuff up. You can kind of pull it out. Like Old Spice, was like what your grandparents wore, they made you. There was that great headline, I think Jess Bassett wrote, that your parents wouldn't exist or something. I'm butchering.
If your grandpa hadn't worn Old Spice, you wouldn't exist or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. They're just, it's like you're pulling this stuff, like from the brand's DNA. And even if it's like a new brand, there's a lot of new brands out there. There's still something you can pull onto, like whether it's how they design their product, like, or the CEO or, their personality. There's still kind of human truths to pull out of any brand. And then it's like, okay, so you have this kind of person in your mind. It's like, what are their thoughts on the world? Like, you talked about, it's like generic people that aren't very interesting, like your point of view is kind of what makes your unique point of view is what makes you interesting. And like an Old Spice person is going to totally see the world differently than a Coke person. And that's where the fun is, and that's where the playground is. Like for example, this is a Simpsons spot I did, and it's like, well, what, it was during the context it was during the recession. So what's Coke's point of view on the recession? Well, if you're like this super sweet optimist, you don't think about like your point of view isn't like, oh, the world's over and I'm losing all my possessions. And, they look at the world as like, oh, well, life's most simple, the best things in life are free. It sounds cliche, but that is what a super optimistic person, that's how they would kind of see the world. So then all of a sudden you can have fun with like that, how they're going to behave, their point of view, that the story is going to end up with a happy ending, and spoiler alert, Apu gives him a Coke and Burns realizes he can surround himself with people and not possessions. It's a very sweet story. And it's like, now that that's kind of like, now that your person, it's like, how would the person behave if blank? And whether this is like some dumb scenario that you just make up, or this is something from the brief, like that, we need a metaverse idea. It's like, okay, well, I know like Kobe Bryant, rest in peace. Like, we know if he's in an action movie, he's not going to sit on the sidelines. He's like an alpha male. He's going to take charge of the situation. He's not going to, like, he's a competitor. Like, so we can put him in a scenario and kind of, it's like the scripts kind of write themselves in a weird way.
Yeah. In Andy Logenauer's podcast, he talked about that sometimes if he has a script and it's just like kind of boring, he'll just try changing the location. Just
Totally.
Like, what happens if I just take this same script and I put the main character somewhere else, and maybe he'll try it at 3 or 4 different locations until he finds something that, all of a sudden now that script that was not that interesting suddenly becomes really interesting if you put it in the right place.
Absolutely. That's a great trick. I'm going to steal from him. Watch out.
Watch out, Andy.
And it's, it's like another thing, is people, this is a very much a screenwriting thing that you'll learn in like basic screenwriting classes. It's like, people have bad days. So like, in screenwriting, they kind of say, put your character through hell. Like, and that's how they learn. That's how they grow, blah, blah, blah. So what, that's like an easy way sometimes to kind of think about, okay, I need an idea. Okay, well, what happens if an amazing athlete has a bad week at practice? What is their version of hell? What happens when an awkward Skittles team gets an offender bender? I don't know. I've never worked on a Skittles ad, but you can imagine, who knows, maybe Skittles come out of the hood or whatnot, and it's all good. I don't, something weird. It's just like, try giving your person, your brand, anything, give them an obstacle and kind of see what happens. I think that's always an interesting way to get your brain moving. You can also just kind of go, okay, what do others think of this person? What do other people think of your brand? How do others behave around them or perceive them? That's basically what I Feel Pretty was. Like, it's just like a visualization of people's thoughts. It's like what they were really thinking at the time, that she was just like, Anna Kournikova was another player at the same time, maybe a few years earlier than her. And it was just like, oh, this is just like another hot, blonde Russian tennis player. Like, she's not talented. She's getting all the press because she's good looking. So we just leaned into that, it's just leaned into kind of people's perceptions. It's basically a fun documentary.
Yeah, I love that spot. Tell us a little bit about making that spot. Before you get into that, I was in California once, and I went to this frozen yogurt place, and I think I was holding my little dog, which was a really cute dog, and there's somebody tall in front of me with a hoodie on, and she turns around and it's her, and she's like, "Oh, your dog's so cute," and was like super friendly. We talked for like 5 minutes. I told her that she probably doesn't remember me, but I made a Nike spot shot, spent a day shooting with her. She definitely didn't remember me. But anyway, tell us about, like, what was it like to make this big epic spot that's turned out so amazing?
I mean, it's one of my favorite films I ever worked on. It was kind of one of those magic briefs that really didn't, like, Nike at the time, they weren't really spending a lot of money on women in advertising. Like, it wasn't like they weren't the ones that sold all the shoes. And so, like, it was kind of like, oh, maybe this brief maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. Like, we got a Sharapova brief and a Michelle Wie, who's a young golfer. And it was just kind of like, here, these are some of our female athletes, try to do something cool. And it was just kind of open-ended, like, let's do something cool. And then we were always floating around this idea of like, oh, she's just this pretty woman. We didn't really have like a script or, any big flashy idea. We knew that was like a truth. Alberto Ponte, he actually came up, he's like, isn't there a song called I Feel Pretty? And and I was like, oh, yes, and so that was kind of like, you can see a little of my Sheena cynicism in here with, it's like, okay, well, instead of this, like, this musical of like, oh, it's going to be so happy go lucky, like, what if it's like almost like people are kind of like smack talking, like if it's like they're kind of singing it snarkily, and not everyone would be that way. It's like, everyone brings their own preconceptions to the musical, but like people were kind of like singing it as if they were thinking it out loud. And it just, it's like, we knew she was going to be playing, in the US Open. So it was like, well, we'll just set it in New York, and it'll just be one journey. And then of course she's going to shut them all up at the end. But, I worked with Yvonne Zacharias. You just worked with him. He's amazing. And it was just like a great partnership. I don't think she would remember me either. Like, but the dog thing makes sense because she brought her dog Dolce to set. But yeah, I mean, I think she didn't really care about the 20-something creative that was there, but she showed up and she did the job. She just kind of had to be herself, which is kind of the best if you're kind of coming up with an idea for a non-actor or athlete. Sometimes it's just best to let them do what they do. And she was kind of like known to be kind of an intimidating, badass woman, and we just let her do that. So she really just kind of had to not let people get in her head, and that's kind of what her skill was. So You just embrace that, and
when
it's
I
great.
shot her, she was returning a serve, um, just for like probably 4 hours. She's just hitting the same shot, and they're you know how Nike shoots go. And I was like,
Yeah.
I'm never gonna have a chance to see what it's like to be standing on the other side of the court when Maria Sharapova returns a ball. I'm just gonna sneak out there behind the camera because the camera was on the other side of the court, and her coach was serving it to her, and then she was hitting it back really hard. And I like stepped out in front of the camera, to the side of the camera, like near where the ball was coming back. And I immediately just like got back behind the camera, was like, that ball is coming way faster than I thought it would. And it's going to kill me if I get hit by it. I'm not going to, I quickly went back to the seat.
That's funny. Well, that's like this, when no one's going to want to be Sharapova's like opponent. So a lot of times when you have like Kobe or LeBron or all these people kind of playing against someone, like, some other athlete's not going to do it. They're not going to be like the butt of the joke. So you have to hire, like college athletes or high school athletes. And I think in this case, it was like a poor high school girl had to like be on the other side of Maria Sharapova. So yeah, I'm sure she probably had a similar sentiment to you of like, oh my gosh, this is not how they play at my high school.
She actually hit her during the shoot. She hit her coach in the leg, like with the ball. I guess the coach got hit in the leg, and he screamed, and he actually yelled at her. He's like, I told you not to do that. And he was like in genuine pain from it hitting him in the leg. So yeah, she could hit it pretty hard.
Exactly. So yeah, that's that. Okay. And then like, it's just like, in literature, it's like you need a foil, right? Like sometimes you need a foil. It's like sometimes you kind of need to show who the brand isn't to see who they are. So kind of what a easy way to kind of come up with ideas sometimes is like just to look on the other, flip the coin. It's like, what are the forces diametrically opposed to you? It's like the opposite of like a happy utopian soda pop world is like a dystopian hellscape. That was a video game. Like the opposite of progress is stagnation. It's like just figure out what's the antonym, what's the opposite, what's the who are their foils, and sometimes that can just be a really good way to get your brain percolating.
Let's watch a Coke video game.
You give a little love, and it all comes back to you. You're gonna be remembered for the things that you say and do. You give a little love, and it all comes back to you. You're gonna be remembered for the things that you say and do. You give a little love, and it all comes back to you.
That wasn't a musical. It was just the directors found the song from Bugsy Malone that ended up being a musical song, but it was really about just like a video game thug that kind of has a change of heart after drinking a Coke.
By the way, Bugsy Malone, one of my favorite movies. Everybody go watch it.
Nice. And I think like, I guess the thing, like my proof point of all of this is basically like Curb Your Enthusiasm. Like Larry, it's like Larry David, your idea. It's like, if you know who your person is, if you know who your brand is, and if you kind of have a good, how they're going to walk and talk and what they look like, it's like you can just put them in a scenario and like anticipate how the person would act. It's like if your person is like a nauseatingly optimistic and earnest person, then no matter how crappy of a situation you put them, they're going to see the bright side. So like then the fun just becomes, like the Andy method of just picking different scenarios and like then just letting your little characters run off and kind of it's like Sims is right. Is that kind of what Sims is? It's like you create a little world for them and then let them drown themselves.
Exactly.
And then like this is more like, I guess if you're writing headlines or dialogue or anything, it's just like people talk like people. Like I think when you think of like, I need to, I am the voice of the brand, it's overwhelming. It's just like have a conversation with people. Like don't act like you're on a stage shouting at them unless that's like the concept, like you're an auctioneer or something. But for the most part, it's just going to be easier if you have conversations with people. And you won't sound salesy or gross.
Yeah, that's a good way. The voice of the brand, quote, the voice of the brand, I think naturally takes people to this sort of omniscient, non-human place. I think the voice of the brand should be a person. Like that's totally how, like, figure out who that person is. And then that's who the voice of the brand should always be.
You've passed Sheena's advertising course.
Yes.
A student. Yes, absolutely. And it's just easier. Like it's hard to write like an omnipresent, weird voice of God. It's much easier to talk like yourself. And I feel like this is like, all this stuff is like kind of future proofing, like in a weird way, like the computers, AI won't figure out how to do this for a while. So these are the nuances. So you can keep your job. Like if you sound like a robot, then a robot can do your writing for you. And I think it's just like, I think at the core of every idea, like even some silly Old Spice idea, like even like some nonsensical idea, there's always like, I think the best ones, usually there's a kernel of human truth, unless you're just like a pure artist and you're creating something totally new, which is very rare. And very few people can do that. And probably not anyone in advertising. But it's just like, there's just, look for human truths. And it's like, if there's a kernel of truth in your idea, it's also a lot easier to sell because you can point to that kernel of truth and be like, this is why this is good.
Exactly.
All
Yeah.
right. And so that was like my whole section on like thinking of brands like people. And obviously maybe that's too theoretical, or I don't know, maybe that just doesn't work for your brain. So I was trying to give other practical tips, like, okay, if Sheena's humanizing method didn't work, like what are other things you can try? So this is the still stuck section.
Still suck and still stuck. Do you have both of those
Still
problems?
suck? Yeah, yes, exactly.
Do you suck
it's like,
and you're stuck?
and
Sheena Brady's got the solution for you.
yeah, I feel like this is my infomercial for sure. But yeah, I think it's just like remove the pressure of yourself to come up with the next big TikTok trend. It's like just write, for me, like a lot of times I just write almost like headlines or thoughts or stupid observations. Like they're like, 5 words. They're not necessarily these long things. They're just like, I think it's funny that people chew with their mouth open. I don't know, like it's just anything you think about the brand or whatever, that when you think about it, like write that stuff down. Like those can actually be mini briefs. And I was kind of talking the other day, like we both worked on Career Builder, and when we were working on the brief, like I came up, because I usually start with like writing and stuff. I had a bunch of headlines, and those headlines, like self-help yourself, those ended up being like mini briefs for teams. Like little headlines I wrote. I wish I would have, like, sometimes I forget to do that on my own headlines, but it's just like, what is a statement, and then kind of reverse engineer an idea to that. So I think that's sometimes kind of an easy way, like even a pithy little statement. It's like, okay, well, how do I make that like the payoff?
Mm-hmm.
And then, I think Andy said this, I'm sure a lot of people will say this after I say this. I'm actually not the best at this, but like, I always forget. I'm always mad at myself when you see another team that like it does this. It's just like, get literal, like get, directly confront the problem. Like, don't kind of like, oh yeah, well, I know they want to, they're going to need like a hamburger shot like in their ad. It's like, okay, well, maybe the whole ad is hamburger shots. Like, maybe we just embrace that. Like, just sometimes kind of embrace, if you know how you have a difficult client, like embrace, if they always want people to smile in their ads, like, we'll embrace that, bake that into the idea, embrace the weird research, like, the weird data point that someone gives you. It's like, okay, maybe what if I just go ahead, I get so literal to that and just kind of make a big deal about something stupid. So.
Yeah. The best example I have of that personally is when we were doing the first Terry Crews Old Spice campaign. The client was just really adamant, like, we just got to say block a lot. We got to say it's an odor blocking body wash. And we had all these scripts written that already said it very clearly. And they're like, yeah, we just need more. Like, can you do one that says it even more? And finally, we just had a whole spot where all Terry Crews says is block. The whole spot. He probably says block 30 times. He's just like, block, 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 block. And his head's shooting off and his arms are flying off. And it just, like, visually, it's crazy. But it actually turned out really funny. And that was just us, like, embracing the very annoying ask that the client had. At least we thought it was annoying. And we're like, okay, well, what if we actually did exactly what they're asking for? Sometimes that can turn out quite funny or interesting.
Oh, for sure. And it's like automatically you sell it. That's the other good thing. People are like, oh yeah, we're all about that. Like, it's like maybe our briefs should just be like how they test the ads, and then we'll, just work from there. But then, like, it's funny, when I was in advertising, I was kind of like, I was maybe like a little anti-brief at the time when I first started, because you're like, well, it's not me, it's the brief. Like, you're just like finding excuses for yourself. And then I remember seeing early on in advertising, this documentary, The 5 Obstructions, and it kind of unlocked it was like it showed you the power of a brief. And it was basically, I don't actually know if the movie is any good. I saw it so long ago. So it had like, I just did look it up, and I had like a 80% on Rotten Tomatoes. So hopefully it's not one of the green tomatoes. So it's not rotten. But yeah, basically it was like this documentary filmmaker asked like another filmmaker to remake his movie. And it was like a really simple movie. I think it was just like people on the white psych, talking about what it means to be a perfect woman or perfect man. And it's like, this guy had him take this really super simple movie and then short film he did, and like he made him remake it in 5 different ways. He essentially gave him all these difficult briefs that were kind of annoying or stupid, seemingly stupid. And then he kind of just gave him these like rules. Those were the obstructions. I guess the obstructions is like the replacement word for briefs, creative briefs. And he just, that's the documentary. It's just like how that process, and how in the result of those different rules that this filmmaker was given. And it's just really interesting, because it's like, oh, that's what we do in advertising. And it's just like, sometimes if you lean into that brief, like, you would come up with something you might normally never would have, so it's like, okay, it's there, use it. Like this, we did an Apple thing, and it was like, a lot of times when someone's like, oh, we got to show off this feature, you're kind of like trying to figure out like, oh, well, we'll just pepper it. We got to show it like 3 times or something. There's like some rule in your head, some arbitrary number that you're like, oh, just get in a few times. Well, we like just basically made that the idea. Like, we knew they were coming up with this feature that was like basically, cinematic mode, which was it was kind of a rack focus thing. So, like being a filmmaker person, it's like, what kind of movies do they use rack focuses for? They use rack focuses to kind of reveal something. So it led us to like a whodunit. And we just basically, the idea setup was like, okay, let's use the rack focus to the point of absurdity. Like, and I think we probably had 20, 30 rack focuses. Like, every shot was basically a rack focus for the most part. So like, it's just embrace, don't hide from it, embrace it.
Yeah. Sometimes like going in the middle is boring, But if you just,
Yeah.
because you're trying to avoid it, like you said, like, oh, let's just show it 3 times. But if you go all the way, like this example or the Terry Crews example, then it actually becomes interesting and funny, because now you're just, it's ridiculous how much you've embraced it.
Yeah, and it's like, this was the easiest idea to sell. Like, you know, that would, just because of that, we're like, we're going to show your feature over and over and over again. And everyone's like, yeah, cool, done.
We like that.
Exactly. And then it's like, okay, you know, the flip side of the coin of like follow the brief is like, sometimes you have to kind of be your own strategist. It's like, maybe, you know, maybe the brief just doesn't unlock something for you. So maybe you make like a mini brief for yourself if it's like the brief is generic, or if it's non-existent, or maybe it's just like you just need to say what the brief is saying in your own way to make your so come up with different ways to say what the brief is kind of saying that are sword related. You know, it's like, I kind of feel like in a weird way, I have a bit of a planner in me, because I have to, that's how I have to figure out the idea. So I think it's sometimes part of my process is kind of thinking about it. So even if I come to the same conclusion as the strategist, like sometimes you need to take that journey on your own just to kind of generate ideas. And then it's like, yeah, sometimes, you know, you've probably been in that meeting before where someone's like totally gone off brief and you're like, what? And like, everyone's like, that's awesome. You know, that doesn't happen everywhere. That happens more at places like Wyden and whatnot. But it's like, I think that strategy works a little better if you already have something on brief and you can kind of go, I know this isn't, you know, here's another bonus idea. But like, you know, it's a riskier proposition, but hey, if you have an amazing idea that is not on brief, like show it. It might not go anywhere, but
yeah, they're like you said, as a bonus, they're much more likely to be open to that if you have already shown them things that nail the brief. And then sometimes that puts them in like a relaxed enough state. Like, okay, as soon as they see something that really works, a client is going to relax. Their shoulders are going to drop. They're going to be like in a better mood. And that's the time to show them the other crazier idea, or the idea that's not as much on brief. And that's your best shot of selling them something like that, is after you've already relaxed them and gotten them in a good mood with some other work. Obviously, that doesn't mean don't show them garbage. Like, don't show them something bad that's exactly what they want. But like, make sure it's all good, but like checking all their boxes before you show them the one that is good and checking very few of their boxes.
Yeah, because that's usually just gonna like annoy them, which happens. You know, like they're gonna be, like you said, less receptive to it when they're just like, dude, we've sold this. We spent 2 months working on a brief to sell to the client. It's like, okay, well, that's great that you have this other idea. But yeah, I mean, but hey, I've been on projects where it's like I've stuck to the brief and someone came in with some wild card idea and you're like, oh man, they broke the rules a little bit.
Cheaters.
You kind of gotta know, you gotta know the rules to break them, or whatever that expression is. But yeah. And then this is maybe slightly counterintuitive, but like, don't try to do work to please your creative directors. It's like, you can kind of start knowing what certain creative directors will gravitate towards. So if you know they always want to do, like, they always love song ads, it's like, it's easy to be like, okay, I'm going to write a song too. And then they're going to buy it. It's like, don't fall into that trap. Like, just don't show them what you think they want to see. Just show them what you want to see. Like, I personally, when I try to kind of chase what's in someone's head, I actually get more confused because I lose my intuition. I think that's also a reminder for creative directors. Like, if you try to get them to execute an idea that's in your head, you know, a creative to execute an idea in your head, it's also very confusing for them. Like, that, you know, part of being a good creative is to like trust your own intuition. And if you're constantly kind of, you know, writing what someone else's head or trying to kind of put someone else's idea on paper, you're never going to learn that. So that's like a lesson for both creatives, but it's also a lesson to creative directors to not just get people to execute your ideas, because you're not helping them in the long run.
Yeah, your work is going to be so much more interesting if you just learn how to trust your gut and develop your voice and develop your style. Because at the beginning of your career, your gut may not be very refined or good. You may not, and hopefully you have creative directors that have a more refined sense of taste and what's going to be great. But you gotta eventually have the courage to kind of do what you think is great and let your voice come out, because for all the reasons you just said, it's going to work so much better. You're going to be happier. Your work's going to be more interesting. And as a creative director, I am much more excited to see an idea that I never saw coming, because it's something I would have never thought of. It solves the brief and it's right for the brand, but it's just something totally fresh to my brain because it's not something I would have thought of. Like, that's really exciting to me. I love it when I see ideas like that. And not every creative director is. Some creative directors that aren't as good, in my opinion, they do want to only see the types of things they would have come up with. And I think that's very bad creative direction. And I would just say, as a creative, don't design your career on pleasing those types of creative directors.
Yeah, they're going to change. You're going to have 20 creative directors in your lifetime. Like, why please one person that probably, won't be in your life forever?
Yeah.
You gotta,
What makes a great creative director? What are your favorite creative directors? What has made them your favorite, and what has gotten the best work out of you as a creative, because you've been a creative director and a creative?
Well, like, sometimes it's like pure fear, not fear, but it's like when we had to work on the Coke pitch, and like Dan was the creative director. It's like, I just wanted to, I guess part of me is a people pleaser. Like, I wanted to make Dan Wyden happy. So there was I'm a competitive person, so it's like, I didn't want to be the one that didn't have the ideas. But I think but the thing about Dan, I guess, to get back to my point of what makes a good creative director, is like, he gave people a lot of autonomy. Like, when you were a creative director at Wyden, you kind of ran your own thing, and he was kind of the creative director. He, like the ECD, he wasn't like micromanaging people. It's like you bring them in for a reason. So you kind of got to let people do their thing. I guess that goes back to the earlier slide of like, don't get them to just be little mini versions of you. Like, you don't need that. You need other fresh opinions. And then, like, I think, when I was a creative director, like, I tried to be kind. I tried to tell people what maybe didn't work about their idea, or if it was like literally just subjective, I would say that. Like, I'd be like, yeah, it's kind of interesting, but like, space ideas don't do it for me, or whatever, like, at least give them, I tried to give something, I could try to let them know their idea was interesting if it was, or gave them like constructive tips on how to make it better. I wasn't trying to give them totally ideas. Yeah, or leave them confused, because at least if I know what's not working about an idea, like, then I get something out of it, or I can kind of solve for that. Like, if I'm just kind of, I hated the creative directors that just did the poker face thing. Like, if you lack an idea, laugh. Like, if, like, it's just, I didn't like that. Like, oh, I hold the power kind of vibe of creative directors. Like, I don't think it's helpful.
One of the best
fun
things
to work for.
No, not at all. And one of the best things that a creative director can do is react like a real human being to the work that's being presented to you. And don't get caught up in your head of like, well, what they just presented was funny, but I'm not going to laugh because I don't think the idea is right. And if I laugh, they'll then be confused when I kill the idea. No, they won't. Just laugh. And then later, after you've laughed like a real human being and made them feel great that they were able to make their creative director laugh, then you can explain why it's not quite right for this brief or for this brand, but it's really funny. And then they don't leave the meeting feeling like a failure. At least, even if nothing got approved by the creative director, they still kind of feel great because, like, well, we made our CD laugh, 3 times in that meeting. And I feel like that, for me anyway, that would fuel me for another week of work, just knowing I was able to get a reaction. And so I think too many CDs are too in their head. It's kind of like the creative direction, like the check-in should have 2 parts to it. The first part is just let go and enjoy the presentation and react with genuine emotion and laugh really hard if they present something funny, like just let yourself laugh. The second part is, okay, now I'm going to go back and put my editor hat on, and I'm actually going to see if any of these work, and I'm going to explain why they don't work. And it's not a zero-sum game. Those things don't have to be mutually exclusive. You could laugh at every single script that's presented to you and then kill all of them, and that's okay. And those creatives are going to feel much better than if you sit there and don't laugh at anything and then kill all of them. Then it's just like miserable.
Yeah, it's like these are, it's like, well, one, work is subjective, so you also have to remember that too. But like, at least, like you said, it's like if you can acknowledge that, like, just laugh. I don't know, like it's the same thing for clients too. Like clients should kind of go through a course, a Bagley course. It's like just, like this agency spent a month working on your idea. Like even if you think all ideas are crappy, it's like react from a human place first, and then you can kind of tear apart your ideas with like your weird strategies and whatnot. But like it's just it all goes to that kind of be a human.
That makes it so much more fun for the creatives, but also for you as a CD. Like I loved creative check-ins most of the time, not every time, but like, because I just let myself enjoy this amazing creativity. Sometimes it was less than amazing, but like I just enjoyed it, and I didn't feel this pressure to like hide my emotions. And it just makes it so much more fun to be a CD, and it makes it infinitely better for your creatives to be in that kind of environment. That's a much more inspiring creative environment.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. That is like the absolute best part of being a creative director. I mean, if you're in it for the right reasons, is just like sitting in the room in a creative check-in. So it's like that is the only part of being a creative director I miss. Like, is just it's like watching TV. People are just presenting you with interesting ideas, and you're like, oh, that's cool. And then one after another. It's just like be a human, be a partner, not a boss. I think that's a good rule of thumb. Be like you're not. So I think it helps when you don't feel like the person's like on the scary overlord, just be on the same level of them. So this is just the obvious thing, but like, I think it's like I don't like when I first started in advertising, looking at other advertising was helpful because I was just trying to understand like, oh, that's what makes a good ad, or that's what, some award annual thinks is a good ad, or, I looked at other advertising just to really generally understand the mechanics of it. But like, I kind of don't do that anymore. It became more helpful to like not emulate other advertising, but to kind of just get my creativity from like other places, whether it's movie or watching people. I'm a big visual person. So like a lot of times I look at photos and I'll just kind of, what is that woman in the restaurant doing in the photo, and you can think of a whole scene out of that. Even if something as dumb as like taking a new route to work. But I just, I think now I don't look at other advertising because I don't have like there's always like a paywall, and I'm too lazy to like give them my information. But like, I don't know, like I guess the rule of thumb is like, I don't go to Ad Age every day, and I can still write great ads. Oh, well, some days.
And I think what you said though, like you've evolved to that. I think it's, you probably, when you're starting out, you probably should look at the best advertising a lot for several years. And because like any art form, you have to the way to master it is to mimic it, and
Yeah.
not to copy directly other people's concepts, but you do kind of have to master. You look at Picasso, you look at Van Gogh, you look at anybody. They started out by mimicking the best at what at that thing, and then after they had mastered it, then they kind of threw away the rules and reinvented it and went their own way. So when you're starting out, like, yeah, be a student of the best ad campaigns, like absorb it, be obsessed with it, and then the time will come when you won't need to be anymore, and you'll just sort of
Yes.
you'll have your own, you'll kind of develop your own style and your own voice, and that's an okay thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, like that's what P.T. Anderson's always ripping off Robert Altman. Like it's not ripping off, it's homage. But like that is, we're even the best artists today are still kind of emulating the people who they respect. So
Yeah, if you listen to like
absolutely.
the director commentary of, Quentin Tarantino or P.T. Anderson or any great director, they're like, oh, this scene is directly lifted from, from this black and white movie that I'm obsessed with that was shot in the 60s. And the movie is completely different genre.
Totally.
That was black and white. This one is color. This one is clearly Quentin Tarantino style. This one is not. But he's set up the scene. There was something that he borrowed from that he loved about that scene, and he's recreated it in his own way. And they're not hiding it. They're like, most of these directors, they're just dropping references throughout the whole, if you listen to director commentary, like the whole movie is like, this was inspired by this movie. And this, I always wanted to recreate this scene that such and such director did. And there's no shame in that, as long as you kind of bring your own new twist on it. That's usually what the best creative people do. They're taking all their influences and all their references and then smashing it into their own brain, and it comes out as something new.
And for sure, that's the key word, is like something new. Like, there's nothing worse than someone just seeing something on Instagram and like just totally ripping it off. Like that's just gives advertising a bad name.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
It's weird. Like you still have to make it your own,
Yeah.
So this
back when Wes Anderson was like kind of newer on the scene, there was a couple of years in advertising where it was just like, everyone was just directly lifting Wes Anderson stuff without really putting much of a new spin on it.
Yeah, and it was just like, what, it just becomes just like wallpaper, like, because it's not as good as Wes Anderson.
Yeah.
So it's just like, oh, you just did an inferior version of Wes Anderson. Good for you. So yeah, I think making it your own is going to make it more interesting too. Okay. I think this is a good lesson for everyone, is really, and this is another movie trick, can you sum up your idea in a sentence? Like it's like, in screenwriting, it's like, what's your log line? It's like, what's your elevator pitch? They say, like, if you can do that, if you can summarize a 2-hour movie into one sentence, like certainly you can summarize an ad, so like, for video game, it's like a video game thug, has a change of heart, not as a change of heart, after drinking a Coke. Or Maria Sharapova shuts up all the haters who think she's just a pretty face. Or like, I didn't work on this, but like the Whopper virgins, it's like, I'm sure the summary of the idea is like, we get people who've never encountered Burger King to try a Whopper for the first time. Like if you can't summarize your idea in a sentence, it's probably a bit too complicated. Or there's probably ways that you can kind of tighten it up, or like finesse it, or just even perfect your spin on it, of like how you describe it. And it's like, okay, now it's like, okay, so you have this idea, and it's like as a creative person, you think it's like done, then you're like, that was the hard part. But it's like, no, you still have to sell your idea. It's like, how are you going to sell your idea? I guess it kind of depends on the idea. Like, it could be a song that helps sell it. It could be a rip or a mood board. It could be a movie clip. It's like, help people. Not everyone can just look at a piece of paper and understand the grand vision in your head. Like you need and no one, and a lot of people don't even want to admit that they can't understand the vision in your head. So sometimes they'll just kill your idea because they don't see its power, because they just don't necessarily, it's hard to look at a Word doc and kind of go, oh yeah, that's going to be amazing. It takes a lot of vision and we're talking, you're gonna have to present it to clients and all these people that maybe even have less vision than your creative directors. So, it's just like anything, any stimulus or visual aid or anything you can kind of do to kind of get that picture that's in your brain, like have everyone working from the kind of same place you are. And then it's just like a dumb thing. It's like, show enthusiasm about your idea. I know it's not like you need to do like a whole, dog and pony show, but like, if you're not excited about the idea, you're kind of like, it's subconscious. Like your creative directors are going to be like, maybe it's not, there's a reason he's not very excited about their idea. Like maybe it's not very good. Like, and then just I've learned this the hard way. Sometimes it's like, read the scripts before presenting, even if you're just presenting internally. It's like, so you don't stumble on it. I think, it's the same thing, like trim the fat. If it takes too long to kind of get to your point, people might miss a point if it's amazing. It's just like, really don't forget about that. Don't forget about this portion, because it's like, really, your idea could die based on just how you present it and not the idea.
Sorry for cutting Sheena and Jason off there. If you want to listen to the full, nearly 2-hour version of this podcast, check out schoolofastonishingpursuits.com and sign up for Creative Mega Machine. If you get in, Jason Bagley himself will teach you the secrets and techniques to doing the best work of your life, getting better creative opportunities, making more money, and having more fun. We hope you enjoyed the first part of the episode, and we hope to see you in the second.